By July of 1991, most of the troops still in Kuwait City were awaiting orders to pack and go home. However, a fiery catastrophe suddenly unleashed, and what began as a small fire in one of the M992 ammunition carriers stationed at the motor pool in Doha Base soon went out of control. The soldiers executed one valiant effort after another to quell the flames, but suppressing the fire was futile. The blazes spread from one vehicle to another, and the people in the area soon got orders to retreat and allow the fire to run its course. As the ammunition inside the vehicle started to cook off and burst in an erratic din of destruction, the soldiers fled and tried to keep their distance, with some of them managing to capture video of the chaotic scene. The fire that annihilated more U.S. armor vehicles than any other event going back to World War II then turned into a colossal explosion that broke through the air in a blazing mushroom that shook the earth, followed by a dark column of smoke and debris. More explosions followed, and since some of the damaged ammunition was composed of highly radioactive, depleted uranium, the scene was about to become a chemical hazard, prompting everyone to run for their lives. Mission accomplished. On paper, the objective set by the US-led coalition during the Gulf War had been a success. They'd pushed the Iraqi forces out of Kuwait, crippled their military capabilities, and effectively liberated the tiny country from the hands of the invading Iraqis. However, not everything was as smooth as the US would have wanted, with the retreating invader burning hundreds of oil wells, causing billions of dollars in economic loss for Kuwait, and severe health issues for the coalition soldiers in the area who had to breathe the contaminated air. Despite the bittersweet results, the US and other coalition members signed an official ceasefire on February 28, 1991. The war was over, but there were still many issues to resolve. Many American troops in the region stayed in Kuwait several months after the ceasefire to help restore the local government and keep the peace. At the same time, they solved the logistical obstacles of the incoming withdrawal. In the outskirts of Kuwait City, Camp Doha had been one of the main headquarters of US operations during the conflict, and had become a sprawling military compound and a hub for the US military bustling with activity. Mostly rectangular in shape and lying along the north-south axis, the station was bordered by the Doha Road that ran north to the waterfront and another road passing to the east and going up the peninsula, making the base's northern half more expansive than the southern one. The compound was divided into two sections, with the southern section comprising a series of big warehouses with a triangular motor pool in the middle. There was also a series of barracks buildings, a northern motor pool, and two other sizable rectangular motor pools on the southern boundary in the north section. In addition, the base had an extraordinary capacity for the storage, maintenance, and repair of armored and utility vehicles, making it the site with more stationed military vehicles out of any other compound during the conflict in Kuwait. It would be right there that the worst one-day material disaster since World War II scourged the US military. The fire. The location where the flames broke out was reserved for vehicles belonging to the 2nd Squadron, US 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, the only part of the 11th Cavalry that remained in the compound. The other two squadrons had been deployed to the field on July 11th to serve as a deterrence against Iraqi aggression. These remaining troops were left behind to guard the base and maintain the vehicles, to conduct routine upkeep and preparations for their eventual transportation out of the country. The vehicles were packed tightly into rows in their assigned motor pool, and a row of M992 ammunition carriers stood out from all the other M109 self-propelled guns and M2 Bradleys. At around 10:20 a.m., a fire started in the heater of one of the M992 ammunition carriers. The vehicle held a load of 155mm artillery shells, which immediately concerned the servicemen at the scene as they spotted the fire. The witnesses immediately conducted extensive efforts to fight the growing flames, but the fire would not subside, and when it began to spread to the neighboring loaded vehicles, the order was given to retreat. The troops working at the motor pool evacuated first, followed by all remaining personnel inside the base, many of whom didn't know the details of the incident. At this moment, serviceman Ray Hasil turned on his camcorder to capture the soldiers fleeing the raging fire. Then, as he documented the smoke from the fire, a massive explosion shook the ground. Explosions. The M992 where the fire began exploded first. The vehicle was instantly wrecked during the blast, which scattered artillery submunitions or bomblets over numerous vehicles, triggering a chain reaction. Like the first M992, the vehicles around it were all laden with ammunition in preparation for possible combat against Iraqi forces. Thus, as other vehicles caught fire or were hit by ignited pieces of ammunition, the cycle repeated, causing several explosions that could be seen from a considerable distance. At noon, about an hour or so after the first blast, the 22nd Support Command reported that the entire motor pool was on fire, with up to 40 vehicles burning or exploding so far. To make matters worse, the authorities also reported that several depleted uranium rounds were involved, which instantly added another layer of peril. The metal is often used for armor-piercing rounds by the military, as it's 60% denser than lead. It is also radioactive and can cause radiation poisoning, especially when significantly damaged. The troops were advised to wear protective masks and stay upwind of the disaster area, now considered a chemical hazard. However, most servicemen had their masks stored elsewhere and had to go on without protective gear. The flames and devastation continued for several hours, with the fire considered too dangerous to be put out. The continuous explosions caused considerable damage to the buildings around the Doha Base, and glass windows as far as Kuwait City shattered due to the chained blasts. Aftermath. Numerous soldiers were injured at the initial attempt to put out the fire, and while fleeing the scene. And in total, 102 vehicles were lost in the fire, with many others getting damaged. The catastrophe was a severe blow for Kuwait's American military. The damaged vehicles amounted to $23.3 million in 1991 currency, and another $14.7 million was lost in destroyed ammunition. In addition, the damage to the surrounding buildings amounted to $2.3 million before considering the hefty cleanup cost. This task became even more dangerous than the initial incident, and preliminary efforts were halted as the scene continued to be too risky and the troops on location were not trained to conduct a proper cleanup operation. Even when specially trained personnel arrived at the location, the danger was overwhelming. 2 senior officers and a serviceman from 58th Combat Engineer Company lost their lives when some of the ordnance exploded. The tragedy forced all cleanup to be postponed until mid-September to be executed by a new team of experts and civilian contractors. And the consequences of radiation poisoning on the troops and the minor details of the disaster were kept under wraps by the US military. To this date, only a few pieces of footage can be openly found online, with most of the evidence confiscated by the authorities. Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to subscribe to all of our Dark Documentaries channels for more history-inspired anecdotes. Also, please let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and hit the bell icon to be notified of our newest content. Stay tuned.